having the deal of his life, having $10 million, right? That's a lot of money. And then all of a sudden the aggregator says, nope, I'm not going to buy. Hey everyone, hope you guys are having a great Wednesday. So we have a really close friend who just went through it was a really emotional experience. He has a great brand on Amazon. They've been growing it, and they entered into a deal with an aggregator. So if you sell private label brands on Amazon or even off Amazon, you know that there have literally been billions of dollars pouring into the Amazon aggregator space. These are companies that purchase brands on Amazon. And so they're M&A, they're investment banks, and literally billions of dollars have been pouring in. So folks that build brands on Amazon over the last 2 to 3 years have this amazing opportunity to not only really make a good income as they're selling on Amazon, but then they also have the ability to sell their brand to companies like these aggregators at really good multiples. So close friend had built his brand. It had got to the level where some aggregators were interested. They got the services of a broker, and they started to shop their brand around. And so this is the typical process. Like, brokers will kind of reach out to different aggregator companies, and it's kind of like an auction. You want to try to get the best deal, right, for your brand. So this friend had multiple offers from aggregators. They went with the highest offer from an aggregator. And understand, a lot of these aggregators are newer to the Amazon brand buying space. So recently formed, just within the last 1 to 2 years, right? And so they did it. And what happens is, when you find that aggregator who makes that offer that you want for your brand, and this one particularly was a $10 million cash upfront offer, and then you enter into this thing. It's called the LOI, letter of intent. It's not a legal binding document, but the aggregator is basically promising, verbally, again, it's not legal binding, that you're now going to go through this process called due diligence. And we'll get into this in a second. And it's usually like the aggregator will say, hey, look, we'll close in 45 days. It normally never happens that fast, but that's generally what they say. And so our friend entered into this LOI, and then you start going through due diligence. And due diligence is like a exam at a proctologist, right? So it is extremely painful. And our friend said it was one of the hardest things they've ever had to do in their life for business. They look up areas in your business that you didn't even know existed, right? So all you're doing is going and you're handing back documents, and they're asking questions. Extremely painful process. And again, it usually lasts about 60 days. And again, from the buyer's perspective, they want to make sure there's no hidden agenda from the seller. They want to make sure that the true value is there. And so then at around day 80, they had gone through this whole process. The aggregator gave them the APA. So APA stands for asset purchase. They gave them the legal document then. And our friend, all he had to do basically was look at it. He got his lawyer. And if they would have signed it, then the aggregator has 10 days basically to fund the money in our friend's account. So they got the document, they looked at it, they gave it to the lawyer. The lawyer then looks and makes sure that it's not all favorable toward the buyer. So they started kind of going back and forth. This unfortunately went on longer than they anticipated. And so instead of a quick 2 to 3 day process, which it should have been, it ended up being a 2 to 3 week process. At the end of that process, then, for whatever reason, and we'll kind of get into them here during the podcast, the aggregator called our friend, and they said, you know what, the deal is off. So our friend went from hero to zero in about 1 hour. From having the deal of his life, having $10 million, right? That's a lot of money. $10 million dropped in his account. Going through this, really, at that point, it had been about a 4-month process, right? And then all of a sudden the aggregator says, nope, I'm not going to buy. So unfortunately, we're hearing more and more about this from other Amazon sellers that we know really well. So we want to help you, if you are building your brand, to not fall into that same trap emotionally. And as well as there are a number of things that our friend told us that we are really taking to heart. And if you have a brand you're looking to sell, I think you need to as well, because $10 million, Nate, is a lot of money, right?
Yeah, so as we get into our takeaways and the lessons that we've learned from seeing a lot of people in this space, as you just said, and our friends specifically, we want to share some of those things that we're going to look to do if we ever go to sell our brand, and that we hope, again, our listeners of the podcast can find some value in. Because even if you don't think that you're going to sell your brand anytime soon, you'll hear a lot of people say, no matter what business you are in, even if you don't think you're ever going to sell it, you should basically plan with the exit in mind. I know there's different thought processes around this, but one philosophy or school of thought is that you should always plan with the exit in mind. And so today we want to talk about how you can do that no matter where you're at in your journey. Hey, if you're just joining us, my name is Nate Slamans. This is Andy Slamans. We have a portfolio of brands that does $15 million in sales. And in this podcast weekly show that we're doing, we like to just talk about our Amazon seller journey, the brand that we've built to be an 8-figure brand the last couple years. We're doing something new in 2022 called the $10 million challenge, where Andy and I are going to basically be both weekly here talking about our journey, but also in a monthly blog and video update, sharing with you our actual real numbers from our brand as we go on this quest to hit $10 million in sales in 2022. So if that interests you, if you also are looking or currently building a brand, go to amazingfreedom.com, sign up to be an Amazing Freedom Insider. That's where you're going to get access, where each week we're going to be sharing with you a newsletter with lessons from the week, news, updates, trends. We're going to be sharing with you our monthly updates from real numbers in our business. Both us and actually our partners over at the Amazon Seller Tribe will be showing arbitrage updates. So if that interests you, sign up for that as well. And we're just going to be trying to unpack the lessons we learned from PPC and ACOS, rising shipping costs, navigating the waters, U.S. manufacturing versus Chinese manufacturing, all that kind of stuff that we've dealt with the last few years. We're going to be talking about there. Go to amazingfreedom.com, sign up to be an insider. All right, Andy, so this story is really intriguing to me because in the last 2 years, we've seen the aggregator market blow up. The stats out there, I mean, you can look them up. I don't have them in front of me, but the number of aggregators went from single digits, I feel like, in 2020, January 2020, then COVID hits, and by the end of 2020 to 2021, it's up to like 100 aggregators who have combined amount of billions of dollars in venture funding, essentially. And so a lot of money flooded into the Amazon ecosystem, and it was kind of like a gold rush, both for the aggregator standpoint, because they're scooping up brands that are they're combining together in almost like a conglomerate cash flow portfolio that then gets valued at purchasing at a 3 to 4 times EBITDA typically, and then they are hopefully eventually going public, and they're going to get anywhere from a 15 to 50 multiple on their money. And so they're really just combining assets or brands and profiting on the back end. Now, there's a lot of stuff that happens in between, like deal structuring and operations. And a lot of these aggregators are more interested in the deal structuring than the operations, because a lot of these guys didn't even know about Amazon selling prior to a couple of years ago. And so it's a lot of kind of Wall Street finance money coming in, and it really just shakes things up. So it's been really interesting to see, as someone who's been on Amazon for 8-9 years, both of us, it's really a lot different, right? Kind of went from mom and pop, kind of like, this is a really cool opportunity selling on Amazon, to all of a sudden, hey, this is a real deal. Everybody in the country is hearing on like the finance side is hearing about these Amazon brands blowing up. So I want to talk about that. And then I want to talk about these lessons that we took away from this friend who had a $10 million deal on the table, and then it fell through. So walk me through, Andy, just, one of the most important things with selling a brand is the timing. So I know there was a lot of lessons took away from that.
I just want to real quick, again, just kind of recap the aggregators. It really makes sense from a business perspective. A similar thing, I think, is what's happening in crypto right now. crypto started like 2009, right? That's when Bitcoin started. And now, you have all these investment bankers that are making these decisions of investing millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. They used to laugh at crypto, but now they are actually investing their dollars in crypto. So, and Amazon has been around now for Amazon sellers really since 2005. So now these investment banks are kind of doing the same thing. They're like, oh, wow, these are real legit businesses. And from an investor standpoint, when you purchase an Amazon brand, it's really a no-brainer because you can really dig into the numbers through the Amazon reports and see that it's a profitable company. So whereas a lot of these angel investors, they're throwing money out in the hopes that a company might become profitable. In this case, like our brand, we can show exactly that it's profitable. So it makes sense then if you can buy 200 of these brands that you can go public. I'll throw a name out there. The biggest one is called Thrasio. And so they're going to go public probably within the next 1 to 2 years. And, they're going to get a huge valuation. I believe they have purchased over 200 Amazon brands. And once they go public, that is kind of like the litmus test. This is my personal feeling, Nate. I don't know what you think. I think once Thrasio goes public and all these other investment bankers see how popular and then how it works, that's only going to open up the floodgates more. So they have been already. There's over 200 aggregators right now that are purchasing Amazon brands. But once Thrasio goes public and it becomes the news everywhere, then it is even going to be more, I believe, of these brands out there. They're going to, and I honestly, Nate, I think that's actually going to cause the multiple to go up on these Amazon brands because you have more money trying to buy them.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors going on here. There's a lot of macroeconomic factors. So you have like interest rates rising. You saw a huge tech sell-off in early 2022 in January, December, really like October to January. So it's kind of a weird environment right now because it's like Amazon's still on the rise. These aggregators are still on the rise, but now you have like these macro elements that are potentially going to make investors a little bit hesitant to drop their money. So I do think what I don't know 100% is it better to sell today or 2 years from now? Like I think nobody really can say that in confidence. So
timing.
Yeah, the timing. So, I mean, I think everybody has to make an individual decision as far as where you're at with your business and the growth. And so I wanted to talk about that, like with timing, how important is timing to the sale, to this friend who their deal fell through? How important was it there? And just in general, what would your advice be as far as like the best time to consider in your mind whether you should sell a brand, or if you're planning on it in the next couple of years, like what are some of the factors that you would think about as you're getting ready to try to sell a brand for millions of dollars potentially?
Yeah, so timing, in everything, it matters a huge amount. And when you are looking to sell your business, I think you would agree with this. It definitely matters on what your profitability has been over the last 12 months. And it matters on if that profitability and gross revenue is going up or down. And so, as a business, you never want to go to market, right? If your gross revenue is going down and if your net profit is going down. And so, as a business owner, you want to be able to kind of analyze that, because if your net revenue is going down and you go to market, then that potential buyer is going to have questions in their minds. They always want to see a business with a trajectory, right, of it going up, because they want to catch that roller coaster going up. They don't want to catch the knife, right, when it's falling down.
Well, that can be hard because I read the Exitpreneur book that I believe Joe Valley is the author of it, wrote last year at some point, and he had a lot of good stuff in there. If you do consider selling your brand, it's worth the read for sure. And most people get to a point in their business where they're kind of done operating it and it is starting to decline, so it's not as fun anymore. And that's when they look to sell. And that's probably not the best time to sell a business, right? You want to sell it when it still has the energy there and the growth, it's on the upswing. But that can be hard because a lot of times you're so involved at the business and it is fun to see it keep growing that you almost don't want to sell. So that's just something to keep in mind. You want to sell before you have to sell. I think that's the key. You don't want to wait till you have to sell, because like any negotiation, whoever needs the deal less can win typically, right? Isn't that how it goes? Something like that. Whoever needs the deal less has more power in the negotiations. So timing is important. So I want to get into some real practical things. If you are actually looking at selling your brand, what might you want to make sure, especially if you're an Amazon brand and you're dealing with these aggregators? And then after that, I want to get into some more projections on like what you think the market's going to get to, both on Amazon and maybe off Amazon. Because again, a lot of people I think ask themselves like, should I become primarily an Amazon brand or maybe more of like a Shopify brand? And maybe we can touch on that quickly, just some projections. But as you're getting into it, some real practical takeaways that I feel like we learned from specifically seeing this friend go through this time period of trying to sell and some of the lessons they took away. And so number one, when you're getting into a deal, typically the way it works with these aggregators is you're going to almost like shop your brand around. So you're going to talk to several different potential buyers. And ideally, you almost want to get into an auction type format where they're going to bid against each other. Essentially, they're all going to put out their best proposal to you through that LOI format that Andy was saying. And they're going to basically throw out numbers and try to get you to pick them. But it doesn't, there's a lot of factors more than just the upfront offer, as you mentioned earlier, Andy. There are other things to consider, such as the earnout or stability payment, however they phrase that, how much the terms of like the length of their closing process, how long is that going to be? How long do they want you to stay on with the brand afterwards? One buyer might say you need to stay with them for 6 months. And another one might say that typically they're done after 30 days. And most of these aggregators is a smaller amount because they're typically just absorbing the assets and putting it into their own operating system. And they aren't looking to have Amazon seller operators. But that's not always the case. There is a mix coming on, especially as we're up to 200 plus aggregators, whatever it is. There are a lot of different structures out there. So as you get into this, that's typically how it works. And so you got to pick which one do you want. And so here's some things that we learned and want to pass along that we're going to be looking for if we ever do this, and we hope listeners can take away. So number one is ask who all the decision makers are who are going to need to approve the deal. So typically when you go in, Andy, I mean, who is it that you're talking to when you are looking to sell your brand? And Andy, you actually did sell a brand back in, when was that? Early 2021, you sold your first Amazon brand that you had. So you actually have gone through this process. Who is it that you're talking to when you first go to an aggregator?
Yeah, so generally it's their M&A team. So if it's a larger aggregator, so mergers and acquisitions. So that's the person who's kind of vetting the brand, and they're going to ask typical questions. Now, like on Amazon, and the brand I sold earlier was a very small, I call it a micro brand. And I was able to give them basically access to my Amazon account. So this is not what I recommend doing, but with this brand that, again, it was a micro brand, they were able to go into my Amazon account and basically build out a profit and loss statement. And when you do, whether it's a larger brand like our friend who just lost out on $10 million or a smaller brand, what these aggregators are going to do is they're going to go in to your Amazon account and they're going to pull the hundreds of reports to make sure that whatever financials you're giving them match up, right, with those Amazon reports. So that's like the really first process. Before they make any type of offer, they want to make sure that the numbers match up. Now, with our friend, and when you work with a broker, what happens is there's actually, he went through 5 or 6 months of preparation with this broker, building out that detailed P&L statement. And so, from his standpoint, again, then when he goes basically to auction, these aggregators know that this broker is legit. They're not going to misrepresent the brand, and they have all that work done already. And so, like with our friend's example, what he did is, he had that all done, but then after the LOI is signed, that's when they go into due diligence. But I think the important thing here, one of the first things that you want to do is you want to make sure at the very beginning, even before you sign the LOI, right? You want to know who the decision makers are when it comes to approving that deal at the end of the due diligence.
I just want to say, maybe this is like a purposeful humility thing you're doing. You keep calling it a micro brand, but this was a 7-figure brand, right? Like it was doing $1 million in annual sales.
Yeah, yeah.
So micro brand, but I mean, it still was a good brand. So don't sell it too short because yeah, it maybe wasn't like retire forever type selling brand, but it was still a nice kind of payout for years of hard work that you put into that. So it wasn't some super small nothing deal either. Okay, so number one is make sure you know who's the decision maker because you're gonna have the M&A team, but you want to ask, okay, who else in the organization needs to approve this deal past the LOI? We're talking now here between the LOI and the APA, who at their company, the buying company, is going to need to approve this deal because you could get in a situation where they sign the LOI, but then like the actual board or the president, CEO is later saying, nah, I didn't approve this deal and it's going to fall through. And you could lose months of time or lose the deal completely, right? All right, number two is ask, this kind of goes along with number one, ask who the decisions makers are who need to approve SDE adjustments. So the SDE stands for seller discretionary earnings, and it's more like an M&A term. I hadn't really heard about it a lot prior to the couple of years, and I was in finance before, but I never did like M&A type deals, and I've been selling on Amazon most of my career, so I kind of forget a lot of my schooling at this point anyways. But SDE is different than EBITDA because a lot of times you can add stuff back in. Like if you've been paying yourself a salary through your Amazon brand as an owner salary, you can add that back in to the SDE. And some sellers don't realize that. And some buyers will not just tell you, hey, you should add this back in. So if you aren't working with a broker, you definitely need to do your own due diligence on how this works because you could, let's say you paid yourself 100 grand in salary. If you didn't add that back into your SDE and you had a multiple from the buyer of a 3x multiple, so you do 100,000 times 3, it could be $300,000 added to the purchase price of your brand that you just lost because you didn't do that. And that's a pretty simple one, but there's other SDE adjustments. Again, if you read that book I mentioned earlier, he goes through most of them. That's why it's a good book. If you work with a broker, that's good. They should help you on that too. But adding those back in can really help you when it comes to your SDE adjustments. But now going back to my point, number two, you want to ask who the decision makers are, and you want to get in writing who signs off on the SDE. Because here's the problem is you might say your SDE, there's like a big gray area when it comes to SDE. Again, these like add backs in, what counts as going back into the profit of the business for the last 12 months, which is the typical time period that everybody's looking at. And you want to ask who's the decision maker? When are they going to decide on the SDE adjustments, like the timeline? Because Andy mentioned already, most of these guys will be a closing period of 45 to 60 days. You don't want to get to day 60 or 59 and have the buyer say, wait a second, you added in these expenses of this one-time product development cost that you did, and we don't think that counts as an SDE, and we have to go back into negotiation. That could really make you mad. So ask upfront who has to approve these adjustments, and typically, what's the timeline? Like, will they get approved within the first week or two after LOI? That's something important. Anything to add to that, Andy?
You just don't want to and again, we've heard of other sellers this happening to. Actually, they came down to like day 80 of due diligence, again, which is extremely painful. And then all of a sudden, the buyer said, you know what? We don't agree with your SD. When previously, 70 days earlier, they had agreed with all the SDE. But all of a sudden they said they didn't, and then they reduced their offer with a significant amount, and basically said take it or leave it. So you want to get that up front.
And I think what happens more is that they won't necessarily even approve or disprove it early on. They'll just see the numbers and wait longer because they just want to like go through, have more negotiation power kind of later. A lot of sellers are tired by the end. You already said your friend was tired by the end. It was like an exam that he was like, I just want to be done. And everybody kind of says that. So a lot of negotiation power goes into the buyer end because they do this for a living. They're not tired by the end. They're doing this deal after deal after deal every month. They have more power then. All right. So number 3 would be ask, this is advice that we took away from our friend, was ask to see the asset purchase agreement, the APA template that the buyer uses prior to signing the LOI. So if you do have multiple potential buyers in an auction format and they're giving you different offers, but you're trying to like determine who's going to be the best person to work with, ask to see their APA template before, because our friend told us that he got towards the end before he saw the APA template, and most of these buyers already have this because they're doing many deals. They already have their template. He got to the end, and then he said it was kind of a hard time working with his lawyer through the APA. And so maybe if you already have a lawyer on your side, or you plan to, if you saw that before you signed the LOI, you might pick one buyer over another just based on the language in their APA template. So that's something that I feel like most people don't know, that you could even ask for that, or that it really makes a difference. But the more I've heard out there, every aggregator is different. There are like a lot of similarities, but as more and more enter the game, there are a lot of differences, and some will make their APA agreements super, super buyer favorable, as opposed to kind of more of an even 50-50 type approach where it's favorable for the buyer and the seller. Some will really try to get you on the APA. So if you saw that ahead of time and you're like, there's no way this is going to fly later anyways, we'll have to revise so much of it, you might just go with the other buyer that's offering you that. So APA is, now we're getting to legalese. So the problem is, Andy, like, we're Amazon sellers. Who wants to even deal with any of this like APA and legal stuff? What would your advice be based on what you've seen other people do, and if you, in your own personal brand that you sold? I know you said you didn't really do a lot with this, so what would you do different if you were to sell a brand?
I mean, you want it to be reasonable. So there are different liabilities that you are going to have to assume as a seller, but you want them to be reasonable liabilities. I'll break it down. Like if you're selling your car to somebody, and and they want you to sign a legal contract saying that if your car breaks down in 2 years from the date they buy it, that you as the seller have to pay for those expenses. Like that is just absolutely ridiculous, right? No one would sign that. And you don't want that kind of one-sided APA agreement. So you want it to be reasonable. You both are going to have to assume certain liabilities, but you want it to be as reasonable as possible.
So in the case of the car, typically it's kind of sold as is, but it might be reasonable to say, hey, for 2 weeks, I'll give you almost like a warranty if anything was to happen, but not 2 years. That's kind of what we're looking at now. Apply it to your own business type deal. All right. So those are, I think, 3 or 4 we went through there. The next point would be, you really want to ask who approves the funding. So I know that you were telling me this about your friend who this deal fell through. And this part really, I didn't know, just because I'm not in this world of the M&A and buying and everything, that they basically, the whole time, this seller thought they were basically working with the buyer and they were just going to be able to wire the money over at the end of the deal. But then it turns out that a lot of these aggregators essentially need to go to their board and get funding approved. It's not like the money is just sitting there in the bank account. They basically have to take it to some kind of VC fund that is going to approve the whole deal structure and the offer, and then they transfer the money over to the aggregator, and then the aggregator wires it over. So what would you do if you were going forward? I don't think you dealt with this with your brand that you sold, Andy, but next time you go to sell a brand, what would you ask going into the deal as far as the approval process of the funding?
Yeah, so I'll just go back to the car example. If you're selling your car and you're having an auction and you get eight other buyers that submit offers for your car, you want to know, like, do those buyers actually have the funds to purchase your car? Or if they don't, then you don't want to waste your time. And you're also saying no to 7 other buyers who potentially could. So it would be just like, if you're going to buy a house and it's a cash offer, a lot of times the real estate agent and the buyer want to see your proof of funds, before they even show you the house. They don't want to waste your time. And so, as a owner of a business, like in our friend's circumstance, he probably should have asked, hey, look, do you have this money available, or do you have to go back and show your investors now after due diligence and try to convince them to let you buy it? Because that heavily influences whether you're going to choose them as the buyer to enter into LOI, or you're going to choose those other 7 who have those available funds. So the offer from those other 7s may be lower, but if they have the available funds, you may feel more confident, right, going with one of them.
Yeah, and I think the house analogy is really appropriate for Amazon brand selling, because there's so much of the same things involved. The buyer, the seller, typically you have a broker for the house, the due diligence period, like you said, the mortgage funding versus the cash. So really good way to kind of simplify it. So think of selling a house times probably like 100 complexity, but it's similar to that. Okay. All right. So understanding who controls the funding process is important. All right. And the next thing I took away from what you're, understanding the friend's journey here of yours would be asking for closing milestones. So if you go into this deal before you sign the LOI saying, yeah, we want to work with you, ask them for not just all these guys, like you said, say we close in 45 days or 60 days, but ask for the specific milestones. And so a couple that I wrote down that I know just from my reading and talking to other people would be, how many days of due diligence specifically are there? Like how many reporting due diligence and the actual product due diligence? Like what is the timeline there and when do they expect it to be completely done? The next one would be the date of the SDE adjustment finalizing. So we already talked about that. Number 3 would be how many days until the board approves the purchase price. What we just talked about. If somebody needs to approve it, when do they actually do that? Is it on day 15 after the LOI? Is it 10 days after the due diligence is finished? Is it by day 45? No matter what, you might want to get that in writing as far as when they try to accomplish that. And then number 4 would be how many days out after LOI until the money is actually wired into your account. So I know they're always going to be like, well, we can't tell you exactly, but you should get a range as much as possible, not just because all these guys say they close in 45 days, but what does that really mean, closing? For me as a seller, if I was selling, when I say closing in my mind, what I'm thinking is the money's in my bank account, right? Like that's closing for me, but I think that's not always what these buyers legally mean when they say closing. So what is the day? Or you could ask them, on average for your last 10 deals or whatever, how long until the money was wired to the seller? And then I would ask too before selling the LOI. I know this is a complication with the Amazon accounts from what I've heard. And Andy, your process it seems a little complicated, but also at the same time made sense. When exactly is the Amazon account transferred, and what happens if it doesn't transfer successfully? So I would ask that up front before signing the LOI, because look, this is like a 20-minute discussion before you sign the LOI. It's not that many things to ask before you actually sign. So anything else that you would ask for as far as milestones go?
No, I think those are some really good beginning questions. Obviously, unfortunately with our friend, he probably should have got some other outside counsel or went to some other brand owners that have went through the process, because it probably would have helped him a little bit. And so that's always our advice too, is, don't go into something like this blindly. Definitely want to seek outside counsel. Thankfully for us, we're able to learn from some of the lessons that he learned. And, just understand the way the environment works. Going back to the house analogy, there are going to be hiccups that come up, during the process. Like the house that I'm in right now, I paid for it cash and we were supposed to close within 30 days. However, it had a renter that lived in the house who was building another home, and all of a sudden he didn't agree to move out on the date that we were supposed to close. So it got pushed back, like another 2 or 3 weeks. And then basically I had to, assume liability and take rent money. So there could be different situations like that come up. So you always want to consult a professional.
Okay, well, on that note, some people need to close deals quickly, right? And that's also a consideration, going back to our original point, the timing. You might have a reason why you need to close your deal quickly. And so in this case of the person that you've been talking about and other people I've talked to, if that's the case, I think the lesson that we've took away and that you want to make sure you're working with their team on is that if you do need to close quickly because you're about to, maybe you have like a spousal health related issue or a personal health related issue, or you do need to move, or something's going on with your kids, whatever it could be, or you're just absolutely done and you need to get out, or the business is having something, you want to let your entire team know up front that you're on a crunch deadline. That would be any broker you're working with, any lawyer, anybody else on your team that might be helping you. If you are getting any other counsel or advice, you want to let them know. But on that note, you don't want to let the buyer know that you have a deadline, right? Because I have heard horror stories of people saying, "Hey, I was trying to sell by this time and the buyer knew it. And so they purposefully basically tried to mess with some things at the end, like change the deal to a lower, because then they knew they held all the power. So timing is important. If you know that you need to close by a certain time, make sure your team knows that they are operating on a timeline where, hey, there might be some more negotiation that could go on, or the lawyer might be able to pick out a couple things to make more favorable for you. But if you're working on that deadline, like, just say, forget about that. We need to close, and make sure they know, but the buyer doesn't know.
Yeah, because otherwise you lose leverage.
Yeah.
You never want to give leverage during negotiations.
Yeah. So hopefully that helps somebody listening as they either go through a selling process soon, or maybe it's going to be a year or two from now and you can come back and listen to these points because you remember hearing Andy and Nate talk about, what to do if you're going to sell, especially to an Amazon aggregator at some point. All right, Andy, I want to talk about real quick a product trend that you just showed me yesterday or the day before, because every week we're trying to bring up to our listeners just ideas. Again, when you're selling on Amazon, when you're building a brand, you always have to have the idea generation or looking for opportunities is top of mind, and you're really good at this. So walk me through a product that you recently just found.
Yeah, so when you're looking for products on Amazon, I'll say this too. It continues to blow my mind at how many ideas and products are out there that you can continue to bring to the Amazon marketplace, where you can purchase them on Alibaba.com and then not really even have to do anything to it to resell on Amazon. And this is one of those products. So I don't know if you want to share your screen. This is a product that really solves a problem. And those are often some of the best products that you can sell, is if someone has a problem and you're able to offer a product that's a solution to that problem. Generally, you're going to have really good demand for it. So this product is a little elemental heater. And if I have a dog, which I do, and in the summertime, I want to give him a bath outside, because giving him a bath inside in the tub, a lot of times it's messy. Well, if it's hot out, it'd be a lot more convenient to give him outside. If the weather's a little cooler, though, I don't necessarily want to use that water from the hose, right? Because he's going to be freezing. So if you're able to have one of these elemental heaters that you can drop in a bucket, warm that water up, then you're good to go. You're solving the problem of a pet owner, and people spend billions of dollars every single year on their pets. Now you've provided them a way to have warm water while they give their pet a bath. Or if you look at some of these products on Amazon, and I don't necessarily, I get a little worried about this, but they're also using them to warm little pools, right? So I wouldn't use it to warm the pool while your child was playing in that pool, but you might be able to do it prior to them getting in the pool to warm that water up. So
sounds like a little bit of a liability potential, so be careful there. I'm not going to share the screen right now. As soon as we're done with the podcast, we're going to stay on here, Andy, and we're going to show some research that we've done, some keyword and data analytics, some brain analytic info. So if you are listening to this and you haven't yet become an Amazing Freedom Insider, go to amazingfreedom.com, sign up for that. And for our next live, you can catch us and see as we go through these analytics on this submersive heater. Last week, I think we did it on I can't remember. We've done some pickleball stuff recently. In the pool cue thing we did last week. So we're constantly every week showing these ideas and the analytics or the keyword data behind it. Andy, what was the buy cost that you were seeing in the approximate sell cost? And we'll look at more details later.
yeah, so you can buy this product for $5, and it's selling on Amazon for anywhere between $20 and $30.
Okay, so it seems reasonable. A 4, 5, 6x kind of price is obviously there's a lot of factors, but kind of a starting point of what's reasonable for private label. All right, Andy, did you see this? Just this week, it looks like that we're recording this at least. It looks like a lot of people in the Amazon space had their restocking limits dramatically go up. So last year, 2021, was the year of restock gate. I don't know if that's a real thing, but there was like everybody complaining that their restock limits were dramatically decreased. There was a period where we actually had our account manager, Ken, emailing a rep at Amazon every week asking for an oversized storage increase because we were way over the limit. And every week they had to keep adding like 1,000 storage to our limit, or we weren't able to send anything in. So it was a big problem. And a lot of sellers were typically sending products directly from China directly into FBA, and they couldn't because there was a restock limit. And so they had to go to a 3PL. And I think it really put a lot of pressure on 3PLs. Amazon was bursting at the seams. So what's your takeaway as far as, I just looked yesterday, our storage on oversized went up to 20,000. I think we only have 3,000 something there. And the normal size was 60,000 or something. So more than we need. What's your take on that? Like what's happening at Amazon and what does that mean for 3PLs storage? Does it change anything in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good sign. Amazon, I think, is finally catching up to the demand during the pandemic, right? That's when a lot of these restrictions started to happen because they only wanted essential products in their warehouse. Because demand, ordering online, people weren't shopping in the stores anymore. And Amazon just had this massive traffic for these items that folks wanted. And so they put a lot of restrictions on non-essential items. Well, as the pandemic, I think, is going down now, they are releasing a lot of this warehouse space that they had designated for these essential items that, again, now people are going back to the store and ordering. And so those essential products that Amazon was getting massive traffic for have fallen. So we now have more warehouse space. They're always in the mode of building new warehouses. So that's a good thing. And hopefully now they're catching up, which is good for us to be able to store more products.
Do you think it's a sign of sales slowing down as a whole on Amazon, or is it more of them catching up and, like you said, just designating the storage space? And I know it's just a guess, but what would your kind of?
I think it's a combination of things. Of folks are going back into retail because the country's starting to open up, as well as Amazon catching up.
Okay, so could anybody's guess, but bottom line, if you were getting hit with restocking limits, or if you were concerned about it because you were about to bring a new product in and you just weren't able to ship it directly to Amazon, which, by the way, we don't do. So we personally have warehouse space in Pennsylvania that we typically use, and we actually do in Washington as well. In the past, we have in Texas. So we've had multiple 3PL locations that we tend to go to first. That's just the way that we operate. But I know some sellers send direct to Amazon. That is obviously a viable way to do it if you're very confident that your product's going to sell and not sit there forever. That's what you have to be careful about. Okay, so I think that's something just to check it out. You can go to your inventory health dashboard. So in Amazon, go to your inventory health dashboard, or if you go to your FBA shipments page, either one, at the very bottom, you'll see two little drop-down menus you can expand to look at what your current limits are. I know some sellers never look at that, so if you haven't in the past, just check it out, see if yours is at a healthy level right now. All right, I want to hit a Tribe spotlight. I think last week, Andy, we talked about Gary Ray, our partner over at Amazon Seller Tribe. This week, I want to talk about Gay Lisby, his co-partner and co-leader at Amazon Seller Tribe, because Gay's story is super interesting. She was a $1 million seller for several years in a row. And then I believe it was 2020, where the world was kind of falling apart around a lot of people. She actually had even more personally happen to her, just like family health related things. And she got hit really hard. And so she lost her $1 million status as a seller, if that's really a thing, a status or not. Not that that means, the end all be all. She was always a good seller, but she lost that, and it was something personal to her. And now in 2021, she came roaring back, and she has a really strong start. So she did $137,000 in sales in January, which she had even a much better December, but in January she did. And I know she's gearing for a $2 million year this year. So anything you want to touch on, Gay? Obviously, just really cool to see this kind of comeback story of hers.
Yeah, I don't forget. I forget what age she is, but she's older. She's like, in her late 50s, and her sister have now built an amazing brand. Like you said, they were $1 million sellers. Personally, like her, she had to take care of her mom. Her mom is elderly. She also takes care of her dad. Her dad is elderly, and just a number of other things that she was dealing with. And then she realized, like, because she was doing a lot of the work herself. And through the teaching and training of our partner Gary Ray, she realized, hey, I have to build some systems in order to be able to scale. It can't all rely on me 100%. And so that's what she did. She started to hire different employees. Oh yeah, Gay's on. She says, "Oh,
Gay's
you're,
taking a
but you are beautiful."
yeah. She's listening, and she's older is maybe not the right word. I always like to say she's very wise and
Yeah.
experienced. Yeah.
Well, I'm close to 51, and so she realized that, and then my goodness, she now has built a tremendous system. She did, I believe, 1.5 million in 2021, and now kind of the sky's the limit, right? As she starts to scale up. But that often goes to just the amazing opportunity that we have and that we see on a daily basis in the group that Gay and Gary run, the Amazon Seller Tribe, where there's over 100. That's 100 Amazon sellers who are doing $1 million or more, basically in arbitrage, online arbitrage and retail arbitrage. And Gay is, again, just a phenomenal leader, kind of leading the way.
And I just want to hit this point a little bit harder, that you said that she's done an awesome job the last 2 years building systems in a team. Her and Colleen, her sister, they have a full-time or a W-2 employee. I'm not sure if they're full-time or not, but a W-2 employee, and then a 1099 person that helps them now as well. So they've really done a great job of taking themselves out a little bit, going from a getting into a CEO mindset of really building a true business, not just kind of selling widgets. So they're doing a really good job there. And I just want to say that, like you said, what we've learned in our business, building a team is really what you have to do at some point. There comes a point of your business, unless you, and that, earlier we touched on a reason you might need to sell. It might be because you got to $1 million private label or 5 million all by yourself, and you're about to burn out because you're working 100 hours a week and you haven't built that team. That might be one of those reasons you have to sell. But hopefully, listening to us or just getting good advice out there, you're building a team, you're building systems, and you're not doing it all on your own. Gay says that there's 119 plus $1 million sellers in the group now. And I do want to go back and point out, we were just talking about the Amazon storage. Alan Taylor is in the chat, and he has a good insight. Alan actually, correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, but he's helped build some Amazon warehouse facilities, or at least buildings around Amazon. Mm-hmm. And so he has some unique perspective. And so he said that construction last year helped also. So again, we know how good of a business Amazon is as far as a business goes. They're not dumb. They're not slow. They're always thinking years and years in the future. And so last year, I think they really did a lot of construction that helped with those restocking limits. So that's also a good insight from Alan.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as we're going off the Tribe Spotlight, I do want to mention this. We do coaching 2 times a year, and we actually just opened up our session. It closes February 15th. So if you are just catching this podcast and you're interested in selling on Amazon and you want to learn how to start the exact same way that Nate and I did by doing online arbitrage and retail arbitrage, there is no better coaching program that is out there in the Amazon selling space. And I will write my name on that, and I will take it to the bank. If you want to learn how to sell on Amazon, you need to sign up for this coaching program. It ends February 15th. It is the absolute best way to learn.
There's a student in the group, I won't say his name because he was just kind of joking, I think, but also being serious. He said if anybody signs up for the coaching and they're not 100% satisfied, he would pay for their coaching for them. That's how confident he is. And again, he's not like an owner and the bias level is low. He just was a student that he's that confident. So just to repeat what you're saying, how there is no better program out there. All right, I want to end with this, Andy, before we get into our data deep dive for our insiders on that pump that you were talking about earlier. Our AMZ Pro Spotlight, you made a LinkedIn post recently, and I was kind of following it because there's almost some controversy, or is that the right word? Controversy, or some people kind of battling you on the LinkedIn post. I always laugh whenever that happens. So you posted on LinkedIn saying that AMZProfessional.com, which is our service, right? You love it because compared to the extremely high fees out there that a lot of reimbursement services charge, which most of them are at 25% of reimbursement covered, you compared those services to loan sharks, right? So you said these guys are basically like loan sharks, breaking your knees to get to your Amazon dollars of 25%. And so you compared it in our business, that's a $10 million brand. On average, most Amazon sellers experience a 1 to 3% of total top line revenue reimbursement. So again, if you are selling 10 million, then your reimbursements can be anywhere from $100,000 to $300,000 through the year, which is a huge amount, right? And so if you take 25% of that, it could be $50,000 in reimbursements, like we've seen in our brand over the last couple of years. And so you said $50,000 loan shark type percentages, and AMZ Professional for a year is $1,100 for a year. I think you got a couple people angry with your post about that, though.
Well, yeah, I just, to me, it's kind of mind boggling. So this service, Nate and I started 5 years ago, was just to really help us in our business. If you know Nate, he's amazing at hiring virtual assistants and training them and teaching them. So we did that just to help ours. And then in talking to other sellers, we realized, well, hey, look, they would rather pay somebody to do it. So we started charging a very reasonable amount. So our amount, if you buy a year subscription, it's $1,100. And then as we started to dig into the space, or as these sharks started to come out, like I like to call them, agencies, they're charging fees of 25% of your own. They're taking 25% of your own money. So again, going to our account, that is a $10 million a year account. If they took 2% of our earnings, which we get back, that's $200,000, and they took 25%, that's $50,000 that we're giving these agencies, and all they're doing is pulling reports and opening up cases. These are reports that you can easily download, right? If you train the team the right way and reconcile and then open up a case to get back. And to me, that is just mind-blowing. And like you said, on that LinkedIn post, I'm sure some of the trolls that were on there that were commenting probably have agencies themselves, and they were saying, oh, no, it's a service. And I'm saying, that's crazy. Why would we, as our business, want to give an agency $49,000 when there's a service like ours that you can get it for $1,100? That's a $49,000 swing. And so, when these people are arguing with me, it is absolutely insane. And it's probably because we haven't advertised. We've never paid, or for advertising for our service. But I'm wondering now, like, these guys are probably worried because if, Nate, you and I charge 25% for the clients that we have, and we have around 250 clients right now, we could have retired a long time ago. Because 25% is a major amount. And so, if you're an Amazon seller and you're using one of these services charging 25%, you need to look at Amazon Pro. It is a $49,000 swing if you're a $10 million account.
And just to wrap up with this whole discussion about selling your brand, in our case, Andy, that 49,000, you then do a 3 or a 4x multiple on your exit. And these are real dollars, right? Like if you were going to sell, that's not an SDE adjustment. That's a service you paid for, that money's gone. That 49,000, 50,000 turns into 150,000 or $200,000 that you are not getting from your buyer when you go to sell your brand too, right? So again, these, especially if you're a larger brand, but really the numbers work for a lot smaller businesses as well. It just gets exponentially more devastating as you get bigger.
And I'll say this, and this is, why we don't advertise. Like our margin, is like this on our brand, but then these other agencies like Get Tita is one, Seller Locker, like they have millions of dollars because their margins are like this large. So that's why they're out advertising everywhere. So you need to take that into consideration too. And I'll just say this again, at the end of the day, all of these agencies are going to tell you they're going to give back between 1.8 to maybe 2.6%, and across the board with all of our clients, the average is about 2%. So don't buy the argument you get what you pay for. That's not true. The average is about 2%, whether you are giving an agency $49,000 or you're giving a service like ours, Amazon Pro, $1,100.
And I just want to end with this. No matter what you do, take care of it. Some people don't even know that reimbursements have a time limit on them. You only have 18 months. So do it yourself. Use AMZ Pro, but don't let that money just go away, because what's even more loan shark, Andy, is than these other agencies is Amazon themselves taking your money, because we know they definitely don't need it. So that's even more like it's your money to begin with, and Amazon just keeps it after 18 months. So if you're not using any service, you're not doing it yourself, that's the worst. At least use something. Don't let it go away. So at the end of the day, I want our listeners to get their money back some way. Ideally, the most efficient way possible, like with AMZ Pro or yourself, but don't let Amazon take it. That's what I'm going to end with. All right, guys,
Good.
thank you so much. That'll do it for this episode. Again, if you are looking to get more from Andy and I, hear even more insights into our personal brand in our $10 million challenge of what we're trying to accomplish in 2022, go to amazingfreedom.com, sign up to be an Amazing Freedom Insider. You'll hear everything that we're doing with our brand. You'll hear about the Amazon Seller Tribe and AMZ Pro, anything else that you need, and you can customize that. But we're looking to get you value each week as we bring you the insights and lessons we've learned from our portfolio of $15 million that we sell a year. And that'll do it for this episode. Thanks, Andy.